Welcome once again to another episode of Two Tire Change. It is Big Rich Richardson here with you, and we're getting ready. We're just a few days away. Everybody's been chomping at the bit, ready to see this thing happen. The Daytona 500 comes up this coming Sunday, and we have got a very different outlook on the Daytona 500 this season. As I've got a chance to talk to one of my very good friends. He is the director of radio partnerships for the Motor Racing Network, Mr. Bob Quick. Bob, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Rich. Good to see you. Thanks for the time.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know this is a super busy time for you guys, and realizing the fact we're actually recording this 4 days before it's going to air, simply because of how insane your schedule is going to be next week.
Yeah, it's not just the Daytona 500 for us. We have 4 practices that we cover. We have qualifying on Wednesday night, the duels on Thursday, then of course the tough trucks of NASCAR on Friday, the ARCA race, which is always a lot of fun at Daytona on Saturday, the Xfinity race, and then of course the Great American race on Sunday. So lots of hours of live on track action from Motor Racing Network next week.
Do you actually have time to be a fan in amongst everything that you're doing?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So you know this because you've aired our programming before, but there are 2 networks that produce NASCAR programming. So the other one is called the Performance Racing Network. Good friends of ours. We're never on the air at the same time they are, so we try to help each other out wherever we can. We're not in complete competition with one another, but those weekends we have off. We're able to enjoy our families and do what we need to do around the house, mow the yard, and, all that stuff.
When you put a broadcast together, and I realize it's a little different with Daytona, how many people are involved in this thing? Because a lot of people may think, well, it's just the people that are talking and maybe one person that's running everything back at the switchboard. I know that is not the case. How big of a team do you have to put this thing together from a track like Daytona that's a 2.5 mile oval?
So it's a group effort. It's not just Daytona. You have to think about some of the road courses and how many people it takes to put in turns at a road course. And you have to think about all the back office people too. We have a fairly lean but dedicated staff. So if you just talk about full-time people that are in this building, you're at the 10 mark. But then you add another 10 announcers that are independent contractors that can live across the country. You got an engineer, you got producers, and so on. So at one point we were traveling anywhere from back when we had trucks on the road, and I can tell you how we broadcast now, but back when we had trucks on the road, we could travel anywhere up to 23, 27 people plus the back office people. So you were talking 35 pushing 40 people involved, somehow touching every broadcast. We actually work on a remote broadcast platform. So basically we get 16 audio channels from every track through a T1 line, a completely digital audio that is mixed here in this building by the producer and then sent to the radio station. So we travel about half of what we used to travel, because you can't call a turn unless you're in the turn, right? You can't talk in the pits unless you're in the pits. So we still have announcers and whatnot, and a producer and an engineer at the track, but we do all that here. So it comes via the internet here. We send it via the internet to our satellite provider. Then it shoots out the programming to the 350 or so radio stations that carry our programming every week.
So all the technology that you have involved. Now it's funny because you kind of bled into my next question. Let's go back. We're in 2025. Let's go back to 2015 or even 2005. How big of a difference is it now compared to then, whenever you're running cables and all this other good stuff?
Huge difference. So let's talk about 2018. At the end of 2018, beginning of 2019, NASCAR merged with a company by the name of International Speedway Corporation. Well, International Speedway Corporation was the track arm of NASCAR, the France family who started the business 76, 77 years ago now. Motor Racing Network was a part of the track business. When they remerged, we looked at ways to do things smarter, better, more efficient. And then 2020 hits with the pandemic, and we were forced to do a lot of things too, because we had to lessen our population at the track just to be able to put on the show and get back to racing as quickly as we did. We were the first sport back to racing. So without the remote capabilities that we have come up with and developed since we started it in 2018, but it really got that jump start, like I said, in 2020. So prior to that, you were talking a full semi-production truck with two broadcast studios and 2 edit bays, plus places for people to have workspace and whatnot. You had a satellite truck with a big satellite uplink in it. You had an RV for comfort for some of the folks that were traveling all the time on the road. So you went from 3 big diesel vehicles traveling every week to what we are today with basically, I want to say, a travel box of equipment that is the size that could fit on my desk.
It's
amazing.
it is crazy the way that you can do things now remotely and all these. And of course, I've been very fortunate to be able to see kind of that progression, because when I started working with the races at Texas Motor Speedway and started working with you guys and that kind of thing, I would see all the trucks and all the different assorted stuff. And you get up in the radio booth at the track and you think it's crazy when they're doing a football game. It's not even in the same stratosphere as when you're doing a race. Taking road courses out, because obviously they're a whole different animal amongst themselves. What's the I don't really want to say best track, but yeah, I'll say best track. Best or favorite track to broadcast from?
Well, I think if you asked any person on the staff, they're going to give you a different answer, because there's memories involved. There's races that they covered that pulls at their heartstring. It might have been their first race. It might have been their most exciting one. It might have been, for whatever reason, right? It might have been the last one that they called with Barney Hall, our legendary broadcaster, who was actually nicknamed the voice of NASCAR. For me, I can't. I love Martinsville. And Martinsville's probably our smallest crew. You got 2 in the booth. You might have either Rusty Wallace or Todd Gordon as a lead analyst, but not necessarily. So you got 2 in the booth. You got 3 in the pits: Steve Post, Chris Wilner, Dylan Welsh, whomever it may be, and then you got 1 person in the turns, because it's so small. You need 1 person. So it's usually Dave Moody, or it could be Kyle Rickey. So, you don't need a ton of people, because it's a half-mile track, right? Then you talk about Daytona. So then with Daytona, you're more than likely, it's going to have 3 people in the booth. You're going to have a turn announcer, a super stretch announcer, and I'm calling the backstretch of Daytona super stretch, but I think that's actually a Talladega term. But anyway, a backstretch announcer, and then a turn 3, more like 4 announcer. And so that's one of our bigger ones when it comes to, because it's a bigger track, right? The footprint is bigger, and you just can't see everything as an announcer to be able to do like Martinsville. Martinsville's so small. In reality, 1 person could do it. It's just the way it is because you can see everything. But the Talladegas of the world, the Daytonas of the world need a bigger crew, and then of course, you say the road courses need a bigger crew because of sight lines and to be able to really call the action.
So you mentioned Rusty Wallace, and of course, I mean, going all the way back to guys like Benny Parsons and Ned Jarrett. How much of a difference, from your standpoint, is it to have a former driver as part of the broadcast team in exchange to a non Cup driver? I started to say Winston Cup there for a second. Tells you how far back I go.
So so I like the way you're thinking here. So we have two guys that will, depending upon schedules, that will be our lead analyst. And Rusty, of course, 1989 Cup champion, member of the NASCAR Hall of Fame, super good dude. Well, we love when he talks on the radio because we say it's Rusty being Rusty because it's fairly unvarnished. It's exactly what he's thinking at that moment, and it's definitely that kind of driver attitude, gunslinger, risk taker. I mean, it takes a certain individual to strap into a vehicle and keep turning left at 200 miles an hour, right? So yeah, it's an interesting and a different perspective than Todd Gordon. Todd Gordon, also a Cup champion with Joey Logano a few years ago. Kind of the engineer's mind, former crew chief. So you have that perspective. So really, they're the same but different. They give you insight on whatever the action's going on, but it comes from a different angle. Now, can they talk the same talk? Sure, but the perspective is different.
When you're looking at the changes that have taken place, let's just say in the last 10 years, okay, to NASCAR, what do you see? And this is strictly an opinion thing, don't my whole premise, the thing is go big or go home. So feel free to express. But what do you think is the biggest change that's improved the on track uh, performance? And what has maybe taken some of the fun away from things? What do you think has kind of had a not quite positive impact?
There's been a lot of controversy around the car, especially early on when some drivers were getting hurt, and Kurt Busch was an example of that car and not knowing what you didn't know, right? And they've improved on that, and the safety's much better. But that car has also, I think, made the racing really exciting. On the mile and a halfs that used to be sleepers, that is its playground. It does really well. Now it's had some challenges with the short tracks and even the road courses a little bit when you wouldn't think so, because it's a neutral car. It's symmetrical versus the old style where they could kind of tilt the body and make the side by the wall flatter, all the little tricks that they would do and had developed over decades with that platform. So it's had a couple challenges, on those, but they're working on those and they're getting better. But the super speedway and the intermediates have been really exciting. I mean, we had 3 of the top 7 closest finishes in the history of the sport last year. 3, and the number 1.
Mm-hmm.
It had to come down to a photo finish, and it was amazing after that happened for them to put that up with the photo finish from the Kentucky Derby and the photo
And it was a
finish from the
3-way.
Olympics. It's all the same technology, right? So it was really cool to see those great finishes all in the same couple month period of action across those 3 sports.
And it wasn't 2 cars; it was 3.
3.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't know about you. I would have, anybody that saw that finish, naked eye when it happened, if you could have picked the winner, you're a better man than me. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to see the replay a couple of times.
Oh, of course. Yep. and
So
it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
when you look at this season and some of the teams, of course, Stewart Haas Racing has gone away. There is the Haas developmental team out there. You've got an increase in some of the teams adding drivers. Trackhouse adds Shane Van Ginsberg and things of that nature. What are you most looking forward to as we get ready to kick this season off? What are you most looking forward to in the 2025 season from NASCAR? Let's not just say Cup. What are you looking for from NASCAR?
Well, I want to see what it looks like to have Van Gisbergen in a full-time Cup ride. I think he's very talented, a super cool guy. I mean, he brings some personality, definitely to the Cup garage. I want to see how the Haas factory team, you mentioned them earlier, they do have one Cup entry with Cole Custer. Want to see how that kind of shakes out, and because there's been all kinds of, and I think Kevin Harvick even made this public, you know, that Tony the last few years hadn't been real involved, and Gene's never been like a day-to-day kind of guy. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops as far as a team. And of course, they have a couple of Xfinity teams too. There's one kid, Connor Zilich, who was coming into Xfinity, who has basically won in everything he's ever driven, from sports car world especially. He's super talented. I want to see what he does in a full-time Xfinity ride. And I think that's for Junior Motorsports. But those are kind of the things that I'm looking at. The star power of Malcolm in the Middle being in the Truck Series, I think that it's going to bring some eyes to the sport with Frankie Munoz. So there's a lot of storylines going into. There always is going into Daytona. There's always a lot of storylines, and then we just kind of follow them and see how they play out throughout the year.
As a fan, and this is kind of timelines, I think. Who was your favorite guy when you first got started with this thing?
So I'm a late bloomer.
Right now, I'm not going to ask you right now because you got to
yeah.
play it down the middle.
Yeah.
But when you first got into racing, who was your guy? My guy was Darrell Waltrip. I loved that Hardee's car, and then I became a Jeff Gordon guy. But was there one guy or one team that's my guy?
Absolutely. So I'm a late bloomer. I came to this, I was probably in my 20s when I really started to follow racing. Now, it was always kind of there. I grew up about an hour from Watkins Glen International, and of course they started the Bud at the Glen in 1986. So I would have been I'm going to date myself, I would have been a sophomore in high school the first time, or going into my junior year, the first time that that race happened. So being an hour away, being a stick and ball guy, I really didn't know anything about the sport. I'd see guys in my high school with NASCAR T-shirts with different drivers and whatnot, and it didn't compute. So fast forward, let's give it 7 years. I'm working in local radio in the radio market for Watkins Glen International, which is Elmira Corning on the border of New York and Pennsylvania, right in the southern part of what I like to call red New York, not blue New York. And I just got picked on the radio station, to do a Q&A at the track with this superstar's son, who was up and coming at the time, and it was his first full year, I think, in Xfinity. A gentleman by the name of Dale Earnhardt Jr. So I hosted a Q&A with him in front of, I don't know, couple hundred fans maybe. They had booked his buddy's band. He played on the drums on one song. I found him to be a very quiet but very genuine person. And sure enough, the next day, I don't really have any duties. I'm in the media center, and in comes Junior after he won the race, won Watkins Glen in his, I think it was his first Xfinity season, 2000. Oh, I can't remember. 2002, maybe?
That's what I'm thinking. It was either 1 or 2.
2001, 2002. Anyway, somewhere in there.
I'd have to look it up, but yeah.
And I'm like, this kid's pretty good. I'm going to keep track of him. And it's funny because, like, once again, was not a race fan, but you take somebody to a racetrack, they become a fan. Because for as much as we love our TV partners, as much as we love our radio partners, you know, there's some visual, there's our guys and they do their thing, but when you're at the track, there's nothing like it. It's just a 3-ring circus, and the energy is palpable. I can't even say that word. The energy is this flows through you. What I was impressed with back then was the money, just looking around and seeing the money, you know, all the haulers and the merch trailers and the hospitality and all that stuff. So I got hooked. And maybe it was 98. I don't know. I forget. 99. It was because it was before Senior Pass. So it had to be 99. I think it was 99 because my current wife, the year I met her was in 1999. So she was with me. So that it was 1999.
There you go. Well, I know I have said this for as long as anybody would listen. The one and only comparison between NASCAR and hockey, or between auto racing and hockey, but in particular NASCAR, watching it is one thing on TV. Until you go to a game, it's an entirely different thing. It is entirely different. I've told my wife this. I
think you're exactly right.
this.
Yep.
And, you know, you can have a perspective watching what's going on TV. But the just dramatic difference of sitting there and seeing all the peripheral stuff, because TV can only show one thing. You guys on the radio broadcast can only talk about one thing at one time. You're sitting there and you can watch all 40 cars going, you know, doing whatever they're doing. Some are on pit roads, some are, you know, making passes, some are doing whatever. So I tell people that all the time. Well, I watch it on TV and it's boring or whatever. Okay.
TV, yeah, you just mentioned two sports that TV has a hard time expressing the speed of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Having been to, you know, all levels of hockey, from bantams to the NHL games, and then the difference between NHL regular season and NHL playoffs and NHL finals, you know, that it just gets faster and it gets better and it gets tougher. And I don't know if you necessarily see that on TV when it comes to hockey. You certainly don't get a feeling of the speed on TV because, you know, when you have two cars that are neck and neck, they look like they're going the same speed. So they don't really look like they're going that fast. When in reality, if you're standing there and they're going by you, it's a whole different sensation. The sound is different. You know, or you get a pack of cars going by you at 200 plus miles an hour and you're hearing, you know, pass you. It's that feeling of speed, the smell of the rubber, the smell of the exhaust and the fuel. Those are things you can't get unless you're there. Now,
yeah,
you also, you know, the smell of the hockey players is also something you don't get through the TV either, which I think is a good thing.
Especially if they don't do their pads quite as often as they should. You know, the goalies kind of leave their stuff in their bag. Yeah, that's a bad deal. But I know we did this one year in Waco, Texas, with a thing with Texas Motor Speedway. That we took a bunch of people up to the track, and hey, knock your socks off, have a great time, all that kind of stuff. And our tickets, this old friend of ours, Brad Gilly, was working with Texas Motor Speedway back then, and they got us like row 30. Perfect. You see the whole track, all that kind of stuff. We got people going row 30, and I know what's going through their head. They're thinking like a baseball game. We want to be close, right? So they ended up having a friend of theirs that was like row 2 in turn 4 at Texas Motor Speedway. Do you mind if we trade tickets with them? Your loss. If you want to do that, fire away. They made it about 5 laps of the race, and then they come ripping back up. Partially because they were covered in stuff, tire stuff, dirt, whatever was getting kicked up and all that kind of deal. But they were like, you can only see what's right there. I said, exactly, which is why we got you guys tickets up here so you can see everything. And you've been to Texas Motor Speedway, I'm sure. If you're in turn 4, you can see straight down pit road. And from 30 rows up, it makes a big difference. And a hockey game, we're talking about the hockey stuff. It's the same way. Yes, against the ice is great. I've been right on the glass. It's great, especially my mother. The first game she ever went to, it was like 4 minutes into the game, wham, right into the glass, and she was hooked. At that point, she was hooked. She's a Penguins fan forever. But if you're sitting further up, you can see everything. Baseball, yeah. I mean, the closer you get, it's a little different deal.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I brought this whole topic up to get into the thing of when you're trying to get a new NASCAR fan or a new fan acclimated to the sport. How do you describe the sport to them?
Well, first of all, I think just if you have passion for it, that's going to come through with anything. And then just say, I'll bring you to a race. You'll be hooked. I'm telling you. And I have never taken someone to a race where they didn't have a blast. And that comes from, the stuff outside the track, the stuff inside inside the track, concessions, seats, the actual race itself, all that stuff, flyover, national anthem, it all just adds together, and it's just a heck of a good time.
When you look at there's that whole thing of radio is theater of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
We're both radio guys. What do you look for, especially in your position, because you're kind of the head coach of this whole team? What do you look for in what your team is doing and painting that picture? How do you? And remember, I told you I was going to throw you a bunch of softballs. How do you tweak, or do you tweak to make that picture even brighter for the listener? Because y'all do a fantastic job, by the way.
Well, so to be completely frank, I'm just a piece of the puzzle. I don't get talent acquisition, but I'm in production meetings, help us, we look at storylines and all that stuff. The actual on-air product is quality control, program director, what do you want to call him? We call him our production manager, is Ryan Horn. And Ryan looks for someone who can be concise, can emote the passion for the product, and then follow the tenet that Barney Hall has always said, going back to the great legendary broadcaster.
Mm-hmm.
Does it need to be said? And if it does it need to be said by me? So, that because they're in the garages all the time. They hear the rumors, they hear, all this stuff, but we're not a news organization necessarily. We're a play-by-play organization. So, there's a lot of stuff that goes on that they could say, but they don't. It's not their job. And I think that goes a long way with painting the picture for the listener. We just want to be that fan who's at the track telling the story, because we're doing it for the fans that can't be at the track for whatever reason.
Well, and I promised that we would go about 30 to 45 minutes, and it's going to time out pretty good for me because I got a couple questions for you, and then I got a real interesting one for you. But when you look at and I know you're the head of the affiliates, the radio affiliates, and you've got, are you over 350? I know it was over 300.
Yeah, 350. Well, that's for a cup race. For a total, if you look at anybody that carries anything, we're, right around, pushing that 500 number.
So when you're in all 50 states and things
That,
of that.
No, we aren't. We aren't in all
You're
50
not?
states. No, we are not in all 50 states. So,
Okay.
NASCAR was born in the Southeast, so that's really our bread and butter. We do well in the Northeast, but as you go to the Mississippi and beyond, just the popularity of NASCAR isn't what it is in the East. So, like Idaho, Montana, Washington State, Oregon, those are places that we are not at, but we're in California, we're in Hawaii, we're in Alaska. A lot of it depends on, if a radio station thinks that they can sell it. And if they can sell it, we're good. But that comes down to, once again, the passion of telling the story, coming up with the right idea for the advertiser, and having NASCAR be a piece of that.
The point I was trying to get to with that was, obviously you're doing the Daytona 500 Sunday, and you've got the Xfinity race on Saturday.
Yep.
And you've got the ARCA race, and you've got the truck race. But that's not all you kind of glossed over that a little while ago. That's not all the coverage you guys are going to have this coming week.
No, there's 4 practices and qualifying,
when does
and then
start?
media day.
What days are we talking and that kind of stuff?
So Monday we have a special Daytona Speedweek special called the 500 Club. It's going to be about the winners and their recollections and their remembrances of winning the Daytona 500, from the Trevor Baynes of the world to the guys that have won it multiple times, going back. And then I think they even talking to our most recent winner last year, which was that William Byron? I think it was.
Yes, it was.
So that we have that Monday night. Tuesday night Nascar Live is our regular program that we always have every Tuesday night. Then Wednesday we really start our Daytona at the track coverage, with practice at 10 o'clock Wednesday morning. Media day on our stream from noon until 6. There's going to be some breaks in there, but pretty much it's solid for that 6 hours. Then we have qualifying that night at 7 o'clock, and that's going to be a couple hour broadcast as well. So Thursday is pretty open except for the duels. Friday, I think there's a practice, as well as maybe a couple of practices, as well as the truck race that evening. The final practice is Saturday, in between the ARCA race at noon and the Xfinity race at 5 o'clock, and then the Granddaddy Sunday at 1:30 The Daytona 500.
And how do folks find out there's an affiliate in their area? I mean,
Easy.
I know of a way
MRN.com.
that's all over the place, but
MRN,
MRN.com.
yeah, MRN.com. Just to find an affiliate and you'll find it. Or I think it says stations, but either way, it's listed by show. You'll be able to find your local affiliate that way.
Now here's one that I had to throw out to you simply because I'm going to put you on the spot. Who wins the race on Sunday?
Oh, geez. So, they called
You can't all be
Daytona.
softballs, Bob.
They called Daytona the wild card for a reason, right? Because
Right, exactly.
you have a big one and you can take out half the field. That's one of the things about this car. And when they're close together is when it's exciting. When they're stretched out, it gets a little boring, right? So the car is designed to be close together, and when you're 6 deep and four wide, it can get kind of dicey. Boy, I think our champion from last year is always good at super speedways. Joey Logano. Denny Hamlin's a perennial force to be reckoned with in super speedways, especially Daytona. And then you got the returning Daytona 500 champion of William Byron. So I just hit all three manufacturers. I don't know if you noticed.
I saw that. Yeah.
But man, your guess is as good as mine. I like to think that people that have success towards the end of the year that can continue into the next, and that's kind of why Joey I think looks good to me. But hey, who would have picked Chase Elliott winning at the Clash last weekend? I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have at all. But he was strong. He was strong all night.
He was. The only car that seemed to really have anything for him was Blaney.
Right. Yep. And there's another one
And
that could win the 500 as well as Chase. These guys are the best of the best of the best. There's only 40 seats, right? So anybody in that field has the talent.
yeah.
Now the question is does the organization have the support for that talent?
Well, and this will be the first year in several years that there's going to be people that don't make it. Because if
Yeah,
memory
yeah, for
serves correctly,
sure.
there's 46, 47 drivers that are racing for those
I
40
think you're
spots.
right. I think there's 46. I think if Castro Neves doesn't get in by time, he will be granted a provisional because of
Yeah.
his star power. And that's been a controversial decision too. I think it's good for the sport. I think anytime anybody from another discipline wants to come and try. And I don't care that it's the Daytona 500. In fact, I'd rather it be the Daytona 500 because it's a better story.
Yeah.
Come do it. I mean, think about Al Unser and AJ Foyt and Mario Andretti. They all ran the Daytona 500. A couple of them won. And they were open wheel guys for the most part, right? So I don't have any problem with Helio coming. In fact, I love Helio. He is a character. He is a personality. He's full of energy. He brings it. He's talented. He's the full package. I mean, he's a great interview. He's a lot of fun, and that's exactly what you want, in your sport. So I'll take it.
Yeah, he is, everything that you just said, not to mention the fact he is my mother's favorite driver. Um, although you guys have my mother's original favorite driver from whenever I first started watching this stuff. Not when
Okay,
I
who's
first, well,
that?
yeah, when I first, Rusty Wallace.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Rusty's awesome.
My mom's favorite driver. If he would not have driven a Miller genuine draft car, she would have had all his gear, no question about it. For the longest time, I went from DW to Jeff when he retired. My dad was an Earnhardt guy. My mom was a Rusty Wallace fan. I was DW and then Jeff Gordon. And man, if you'd have heard the stuff at our house when the races were on, especially when they were running 1, 2, 3,
Oh
which is
yeah.
quite frequent.
Yeah.
But when he retired, Mom became a Juan Pablo Montoya fan, and then picked up Elio Castroneves as she got more into the open wheel stuff. So she's psyched about him being in the Daytona 500. And I think there's a lot of IndyCar fans that are going to be the same way, that are going to be really excited to see Elio, because he's one of those. He's not, okay, I'll be the one that says it, not you. He's not a jerk like Denny Hamlin that everybody wants to see get run into the wall.
He has. We'll just say he's become
Castroneves,
the villain in the garage. You are correct. Yes.
yeah, Castroneves is one of those guys that I had the opportunity to interview him a couple times. I talked to a lot of the guys when they had the IndyCar races at TMS, and never had a bad word said about him. So I think that's kind of cool that he is going to run. Van Ginsbergen, of course, coming over from what he, all the stuff that he was running, because he was running what 4 or 5 different types of vehicle. This guy, you could put
So
him on a tricycle, and I think he
yeah.
could run.
So you're right. I think he did run a bunch of different series in New Zealand and Australia. He's from New Zealand, but everybody says Australia because he really made his mark with the Australian Super 8, V8, supercars, Super V8 cars. I don't know, but they're V8 and they're supercar. Anyway, so yeah, it's like I think a couple time champion doing that. So I mean, and that's one of the reasons why that's one of the reasons why he did so well, because with that Chicago street course a couple of years ago when he, was the first rookie to win a race since the beginnings of NASCAR, because of cars very similar and they do street courses. So he kind of had that as an advantage. I'm sure he spent his time in the sim and everything doing, preparing and whatnot.
Right.
But yeah, super talented guy, and a great personality too. Not as big as Helio, but the more of the self-deprecating Australian, New Zealand type humor. Really good.
And from what I hear, and this is something that I've found with 95% of NASCAR guys, he's super with the fans.
Mm-hmm.
I have found very few guys. I covered TMS every race they did up there for about 11 years, and did Dover when I was in other markets. I did, other tracks, did Chicagoland, that kind of thing. I have seen very, very few bad reactions between a driver and a fan. And most of the time it was because of the fan.
It
But,
can be.
especially with the kids and that kind of stuff, which to me is where it all matters.
Yep.
These guys are and SVG, from what I hear, is fantastic with all that stuff.
So I think one of the appealing things, and it's still true today, is that these guys are just blue collar guys that got pretty good at doing this thing that most people don't do, and that's drive fast in a circle, right? So I think they have good perspectives, and they don't look at themselves as stars, and I think that's part of the marketing problem, is that you don't have these big personalities because they are humble. They're just, they feel like they're, just like the next guy. And I get that same feeling with hockey players. You brought up hockey. That's one of the things. There's a lot of similarities between the two sports because of that blue collar attitude aspect, aura around both sports.
Absolutely. Well, Bob, man, I'll tell you what, it's been a blast.
Yeah, good talking to you.
I know when we talked earlier this week, I told you, I was going to pick your brain, but I was going to throw you some softballs, except for picking the race. I had to throw you the softball. By the way, before we go off the air, my official pick for all you folks out there, come on, man. It's a 24 car. William Byron got to come through it. After Jeff had that talk with him and planted his foot in his butt 2 years ago and said, either drive or don't. You've seen what's happened. And Byron is definitely, he in fact, he's going to be my guy I picked to win the Cup as well.
Super talented. I can see him being there in the Final Four for sure again. And there's no question he has the ability. There's no question that he has the support. It's just being in the right place, doing the strategy from the pit box to have him at the front at the end. Because if you're leading on the next to the last lap, you're probably not winning that race.
That's ask Michael McDowell. Yeah,
for sure.
And I love Michael. I've had a chance to talk to him a few different times in that, but man, oh man, oh man. Hey, but Bob, I appreciate you very much. Tell everybody again how they can check out where the affiliate to listen to MRN is in their area, or can they? You mentioned streaming.
Yeah.
Where can they get on the stream?
Yeah. So you can find both at mrn.com. So you can find your local affiliate just by clicking stations at the top of the website there. And then for every live broadcast, there is a live stream for it as well. If you don't have a local affiliate, of course, you can always catch us via Sirius satellite radio on the NASCAR channel as well. A bunch of our guys work it between Dave Moody and Mike Bagley and Pete Pistone and whatnot. So, we're friends with those guys as well. So yeah, that's the ways to get it for sure.
Anything else to tell the folks before we let you go?
William Byron's going to win the Daytona 500. I just heard that. Put the money down now.
He is the director of radio partnerships over at Motor Racing Network, and we've known each other more years than probably either one of us want to admit to. Bob Quick, I appreciate your time, man. Hey, it is Two Tire Change with Big Rich. I told you when we started this thing, we're going to go outside the box on our NASCAR coverage, and we're doing exactly that. Tune in next Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, right here on Driving to the Top Productions for another episode of Two Tire Change. For Bob Quick, I am Big Rich. So long, everybody.